a stakeholder. So given that there have been a lot of developments since our last webinar in October, we thought it was a good time to educate everyone on where the reform efforts lie, what to look for in the next coming months and then throughout this administration, and then how we can be helpful in communicating with our tribal leaders. And we want to make sure that we're also answering any questions that participants have. So following my remarks, we'll hear from Anawake Rose, and then we'll turn it over to BIE. At the end of the BIE presentation, there will be an opportunity for a Q&A session. At that point, we'll give instructions to participants for how to answer questions. And we just want to thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us for this important webinar. Anawake, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Denise, and thank you to NCAI for hosting this really important session. And thank you to the acting director at BIE for taking some time to come back and revisit and to bring us up to speed on the important work that BIE is doing. NIA is incredibly excited to see that the momentum around the reform is continuing and that there is dedication from our tribal leadership and from the administration to ensure that our schools are receiving just the best quality of services that they can. We all know that it's just gone on for too long, that our students have not received the attention that is so much needed. And so this focus point that our tribal leadership, that our national organizations, and that the administration is providing to ensure this for our students is so very critical and very, very welcome. We know from our teachers that we are desperate to hear from the reform about how this is going to impact their day-to-day, what their role is going to be, are things going to be changing for the instructional practices within our schools. So on top of the administration changes, we're looking forward to hearing from BIE the ways that we're really going to see changes in the way that our students are receiving their day-to-day education, and we know that quite a lot of work has been done so far to make sure that this is a reality. So we look forward to continuing to partner with NCAI and with our tribal leaders and with BIE to ensure that anything that we can do to improve our school operations, know that we're standing ready and standing with you as you're making these really tough decisions and making the changes that we so desperately need for our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Anawake. And now we're going to turn it over to Anne Marie and her team at BIE to give a presentation on the status of the reorganization.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you, Anawake, for this opportunity to speak with the constituency of both of the NIEA and NCAI today. I really, really appreciate it. I would like to thank the callers, those who are participating in today's webinar, for taking the time and for your interest and commitment to our youth and to this important reorganization effort that we're undertaking. I'd like to acknowledge the staff that I have in the room. I have the Chief of Staff, Juanita Mendoza, our Program Analyst, Wendy Grayeyes, Vicki Forrest, our Director of School Operations, Marilee Fitzgerald, and I'm going to totally muddle your title, Marilee.
You can make one up.
I think it was on, it might be on the slide. Yeah. Shoshana Silverstein, who works with me both in my Asia capacity and my BIE capacity. Jackie Cheek, Special Assistant. And I'm also joined by two of our Associate Deputy Directors, Rosie Davis for Tribally Controlled Schools and Tony Dearman for Bureau Operated Schools. And it's just a wonderful team that I've stepped into working with, and I'm thrilled they can be here with me today, support me both in this webinar but in all of the work that we're doing together. And I thank them for being here with me and want to let you know that you have a committed team of folks who are here to answer questions today, help me do with this presentation, but as we do the work of the reform going forward. So we'll start with some of the things that Anawake had already referenced. You know, why we undertook this reform is, I think, pretty clear. That's a story most of us on the line are familiar with. We are trying to deal with some pretty significant achievement gaps in our student population. I think a good, really location to identify some of the data that outlines this is in the Native Youth Report, which was released at the, I believe, the 2014 Tribal Nations Conference. And it gives us the picture of our graduation rates, some of the high rates of suicide, just the unhealthy environment that unfortunately some of our students are learning and living in. And so as the Bureau of Indian Education, we want to be driving towards solutions and making sure that we are providing the best environment we can for learning for our kids, and that we can close that achievement gap and provide successes and opportunities. We want to avoid the fragmentation that we currently have in our organization. We're spread across Indian Affairs, and that has sort of had us tying one hand behind our back. And so we know that that's something that we needed to address. And we did not promote tribal self-determination in the way it needed to be in the old BIE. And with those as the indicators of what was going wrong, in 2012, Secretary Sally Jewell and then Secretary of Education Arnie Duncan convened an education study group to help diagnose some of these systematic challenges that we're facing the BIE. And in the process of that time, the study group met with well over 400 stakeholders through listening sessions to try and gather feedback on how to create a set of recommendations that ultimately became what we call the Blueprint for Reform. The study group issued that Blueprint for Reform, and Secretary Jewell issued Secretarial Order 3334 in June of 2014. The blueprint and the executive order combined helped develop a pretty comprehensive plan that focuses on 5 pillars to make sure that all students attending BIE schools receive a world-class education. The secretarial order itself is where we get the 2 phases of implementation that we at BIE often refer to. I don't know that it's in everybody's sort of daily vernacular, but it's something we use around here pretty regularly, and so I like to sort of let everyone know where that language came from, and it's out of the secretarial order. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. And you'll see on the end of this slide here we have a quote from Sally Jewell. I will say that in my time here, not only as acting director of BIE, but as deputy assistant secretary, I couldn't be more encouraged and more excited about working for such a committed and sort of fearless leader in the area of all of Indian Affairs, but in particular into Indian education. And so that sort of leads me to the next slide, which is a quick introduction of me. I come to this work, everything that I outlined that led to the blueprint, as a relatively new employee to federal government. I've been involved about 1.5 years in Indian Affairs. I am also the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs. That is how I came to DC, where I worked on Indian energy and economic development issues, Office of Self-Governance, and a lot of our climate change work, in addition to a number of other things. So I've been in the Office of the Assistant Secretary for about 18 months, and we had this unexpected transition in the BIE director's position, and I was asked to step in, and I had worked on the issues at a very 30,000-foot level as DAS, as Deputy Assistant Secretary. And when I stepped into the acting director position, obviously it's a much more the day-to-day operations of the organization, and I had a pretty vertical learning curve and probably still do. I have been saying I have my sea legs now, but I don't want to jinx myself. But there was a lot going on. I've definitely moved on or stepped into a fast-moving train, and that's a good thing, because what it means is that we are moving quickly and swiftly to implement all the aspects of the reform. Again, by way of introduction, so I'm a former tribal college president. I'm an enrolled member of the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska. I was born and raised in Winnebago. I got my undergrad degree really close to the reservation at a small state school, and actually got a teaching degree. And then was fortunate enough to be accepted to law school. It was something I always wanted to do, and attended law school in the Southwest. which has ultimately become sort of my second home. My husband and I have lived up and down northern and southern California, and by northern California I mean about 6 hours north of San Francisco. So we lived in Hoopa for a number of years, and then in southern California, both the Palm Springs area and the Orange County area, before the call for me to really go home was really strong, and that's when I went home to become a tribal college president. I then started doing some policy work, went back to Arizona as then Governor Napolitano's policy advisor for tribal affairs, and then started working for my alma mater, Arizona State University College of Law, where I worked in recruitment and retention of students, Native students who wanted to go to law school. And then this opportunity presented itself, and I knew that it was just a really rare and unique opportunity to work for administration that wanted to do really positive things for Indian country. So everyone from the President and the First Lady to Secretary Jewell's commitment to former Assistant Secretary Washburn was a team I wanted to join. And I enjoyed the work that I was doing in Asia, and I continue that work as much as you can wear two hats and balance all of it. But really excited about the work we're doing in BIE, and I see it as a really, again, another unique opportunity for me to contribute and to do positive things for Indian country. The blueprint is really established around 5 pillars, and our goal here is to increase student achievement, as I said earlier. We want to promote student well-being, create healthy, positive learning environments for our youth, and as well as promoting tribal sovereignty in a way we never have in the past. The 5 pillars are outlined in the diagram that's before you on the PowerPoint. Highly effective teachers and principals, agile organizational environment to promote educational self-determination for tribes, supports through partnerships, and obviously a budget that supports our capacity building mission. And the goal here is to do exactly what Anawake was indicating, is making sure that what's happening in the classroom is a world-class instruction to improve the lives of our students. I thought it might be useful here to go through some of the things that we're doing under the pillars. You know, the reform and the secretarial order are basically our work plan. They're driving what we're doing every day, choices about what we do and about what we don't do. We want to make sure that we're focusing our efforts with the lean, mean BIE we currently have right now in all of the right ways. So under the pillar of promoting self-determination, we've established the Office of Sovereignty in Indian Education. We have a couple of grant programs that are meant to really help us support tribes as they consider taking over their schools. And $8.4 million has gone out to 13 tribes in our SIE, or Sovereignty in Indian Education programs, as well as our Tribal Education Department grant programs. So the TED program goals include educational code development, making sure there are educational policies and tribal standards applicable to curriculum, personnel, and students, and also making sure we're promoting tribal educational control of the educational systems within Indian country, within tribes, and making sure that we are providing, tribes can provide tribal administrative support, that they're looking at ways they can coordinate educational programs across all of their systems, from preschool to elementary, secondary, and beyond, and just make sure we're encouraging tribal administrative support of Bureau-funded schools as well. In the SIE program, this is where we're focusing efforts on tribes that want to pursue alternative accountability workbooks. We've had some real success at Miccosukee, and we're continuing that trajectory with another tribe right now, and hope to get another alternative accountability workbook across the finish line very soon, and helping tribes develop an implementation plan for the areas of focus that they need to be looking at should they want to take over control of their schools and develop a tribally managed school system. Under highly effective principals and teachers, we have a number of partnerships that we are working on here. One of them is the National Teacher Project. The National Teacher Project is a nationally known organization, highly recognized. The project is helping us look at how we can restructure our human resources under BIE and helping us to overhaul our practices to be in line with modern practices. The Teacher Project has done an assessment of our organizational challenges that inhibit our ability to recruit and retain good talent. And we are in the process of beginning to implement the recommendations of the National Teacher Project, including some website development, new recruiting strategies, streamlining our contract renewals, as well as some leadership development opportunities they are recommending to us. So that is happening as we speak. One of the other partnerships we're doing is with, and I always get this acronym wrong, National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. So I'll call them the National Board. Their focus is on making sure that we have high quality professional development. Research shows that nationally board certified teachers have a greater impact on student learning and achievement than non-nationally board certified teachers. And the program here is really one of training for our teachers. It's a rigorous set of training. There's a testing component after each of what is 4 total components. It does take an average of 3 years to complete. So it's a very intense program, but like we said, the research has shown that it has a great impact in the classroom and on student learning and achievement. We started actually, BIE had 36 certified teachers. An additional 204 have successfully completed component 1. About 165 of them have decided to move on to the second component, and we have an additional 184 signed up for component 1 this year. We do have a bonus structure that is available for teachers who decide to pursue this. A total of up to $4,000 is available for successful completion of each component or each module. And then upon certification, final certification, there's an actual bonus to the base salary. So it's a really a great way to promote getting this certification and making sure that we're providing the best professional development we can for our teachers so that our students are benefiting from that. Under the pillar of agile organizational environment, this is really getting to what I mentioned earlier, the phases that were identified in the secretarial order. Phase 1 is the reorganization of our ADDs. Many of you may know that we moved from a location-based structure to a function structure, and that's where Rosie and Tony, who I've already introduced, and Dr. Pfeiffer, who's our ADD for Navajo, come in. Those folks are seated and are working hard and diligently and helping to establish the ERCs, or the Educational Resource Centers, which we'll get into a little bit more here later. And then what will be phase 2, which is our school operations, which we have a couple of slides to discuss later on as well. So that's how we're really changing the organization itself. And one of my colleagues, I believe it was Marilisa, said the other day, you know, we're doing more than just moving boxes here. We're changing the whole structure of the organization so that it's a much more supportive environment to schools. And I think a couple of the slides that we talk on, I'll talk about later, really reinforce that. And I think that's a really critical point, is our reorganization in this agile organizational environment pillar is more than an org chart. It's about creating a new culture and environment and making sure we have functions available to us unlike we've had in the past. Onto the comprehensive supports through partnerships. This is where folks like you on the phone are extremely critical to our work, as well as our partners at AHEC. We have a program that we've started with them to enhance college readiness and build pathways to post-secondary education. And then obviously NCAI, I'd like to shout out, give you a pause for helping us and providing the support resolution for the BIE reorganization at last year's conference. We also have CCSSO. We have a number of activities that we're doing with them, and they're a great partner as we sort of navigate the world of ESSA and how that's going to look for BIE and tribes across the board. And then finally, I want to make sure that I thank NIEA for their continued support and their willingness to pursue future partnership opportunities with us to make sure that we're achieving the goal that Anna Wig outlined for us in the beginning of making sure that the classrooms themselves are impacted by everything we do and keeping us focused on that work. The other thing, the other pillar is the budget support should support our capacity building mission. We had a FY16 plus up of $100 million, and this is something that I know has been a long-standing issue, and it's really, really important to tribes and to the membership of NCAI and NIEA, and that is making sure that grant support costs are funded, fully funded. So that plus up helped us be able to accomplish that goal. That is also where we got some money available to do the TED grant support that I talked about earlier, that included tribal code development and those kinds of things. And a big chunk of that plus up was for the planning and design of new schools. And so we don't get in too much today on the construction side and all of the work that's being done for campus replacement and individual school replacement and planning and design for the other schools that have made the list for replacement. But there is money in there for that, and that's critical to make sure that we're providing a learning environment, facilities that are worthy of our students. And we have a long way to go on that, but we've got a good start with that 16 budget, and I hope that continues. There's nowhere else where I think we see the bipartisan support in anything in government right now than on Indian issues, and in particular Indian education issues. So great successes there. We also were able to forward fund Haskell, SIPI, and our tribal technical colleges, which is no small feat. And so I think that's a really great indicator of success we've had thus far. So now I'd kind of like to talk a little bit through the milestones we've had. So once the blueprint was established and we went out on consultation on that blueprint and developed sort of what I'm calling our work plan, or our activities under the reform, a number of things had to happen to make sure all of our partners, including those on the Hill, were comfortable with the direction we were going, and that we were utilizing the funding that is provided to us in an appropriate way, and that met all the goals of our stakeholders and the administration and Congress as well. That happened in 2015, and that may have been the last time we've actually talked with all of you. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to have updates. Actually, 2016 was the last time we probably talked, but in 2015 we got the House approval letter on the reprogramming conditions, or with conditions, and those conditions set a series of things that Congress wants us to do as far as communicating with stakeholders. We do have some pending litigation, so we have some holds on some of the activities under the reform, and the approval letter outlines some of those things that they want us to be aware of as we move forward. And then in the unofficial green light came from the Senate in just a few months ago in February of 2016. And that's when that fast train that I mentioned earlier really started moving. The brakes were pulled and things started moving quickly, and we haven't stopped since. I've been here 2 months and we've moved rapidly. Nothing has really slowed. We had I think a tiny bit of transition time, but in the broader scheme of things, I think since coming on board, we've been able to continue the pace of implementing the reform right at the same speed. We had, as I mentioned earlier, the ADDs and the resource centers. That work was already being done in order to get announcements out and hiring for those started. We were also at the same time building a leadership team, and I think this is where Rosie, and in fact I'll invite the two of either of you like to talk a little bit about what we've been trying to do in building the leadership team environment once we got the three of you placed and in line.
Okay. Thank you for your opportunity. My name is Tony Hierman. I'm the Associate Deputy Director for Bureau Operating Schools. And what's exciting about the way we're going to do business is we're going to flip the way we're going to do business. I come from the school level. I served as a high school principal and a superintendent, and the way we've done business in the past was wrong because we were servicing everyone above us. The way we're going to structure the ERCs is to support our schools, to make sure that our schools, our staff, and our kids are given everything that they need to be productive, and to focus on student learning. You know, I think in looking at the reorganization, it's a lot more than just shifting boxes and moving people around. It's about the end result. The end results are the way we do business and our student focus, and producing test scores, whatever each school may be needing assistance in, identifying that. And we call that individual school plans, because what's going to happen is not one system is going to fit all of our situations, all of our reservations, all of our communities. And going in and actually establishing ERCs that know our communities, know our schools, and know the needs of our communities and our schools to be able to help produce results and test performance. You know, it goes up and beyond test performance. You're looking at student attendance rates, graduation rates, all aspects that you can actually measure growth on.
Hi, my name is Rosie Davis, and so we started off with an instructional leadership team of 4, which consisted of the 3 associate deputy directors and our acting chief academic officer. And as soon as the green light came in February that Anne-Marie mentioned, we were able to actually begin staffing our ERCs, and we were able to expand from a team of 4 to a team of 12. And so we had our first instructional leadership team 12 2 weeks ago, and it was to me kind of what we're looking for is like the ripple effect, you know, the butterfly who flaps its wings, and we feel the effects of it across countries. And we're hoping that that is what we're doing as we begin that refocusing from administrative types of details to actually student learning, what's happening in the classroom between the teacher, the student, and the content of the course. And it's very exciting. I have staff who have not even officially transitioned who are so excited about what they're doing. In talking with the training specialist yesterday, he is just so ready to go out to the tribes and start working with school boards and tribal governments as far as the training needs that they're going to relay to us. So it's really a point of where we're able to move forward and move forward in numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie and Tony. And one of the things I failed to mention when I was talking through the pillars and the highly effective principals and teachers, and I should say this is one of the reasons why Rosie and Tony are in town today, and Tamara is joining a group who are meeting to talk about our teacher equity plan. Would either of you want to sort of touch on what that work is we're currently doing and what that is?
Sure. This is Tony again. Currently what we're doing right now today, the group is reviewing the phase 1, the preliminary plan that we set out. And we're also comparing it to state plans. And we want to make our system really competitive to get the best teachers that we can for our schools and our communities. And in doing that, we're looking at strategies to actually recruit, looking at data systems across our systems that will tie in our tribally controlled as well as our BIE operated, and really establishing a data system that we can really go in and utilize to look at vacancies, high turnover areas, and identifying areas that we can assist in and helping getting and recruit and retain highly qualified teachers.
And I'll mention that this is a requirement under ESSA. It's a long-term effort, but the team that Tony and Rosie described is critical to helping us to not only build this plan and implement it, but a number of other things across the board that we're going to need to be doing. And within a week, I think, of the green light being announced for approval of our blueprint and to move forward on it, we had brought in a Chief School Transformation Officer who's carrying out the duties of an acting Chief Academic Officer and was critical in helping build this leadership team that we're establishing through the 3 ADDs that are mentioned. And they decided to build out that team, and that meeting was held, as Rosie said, just a couple of weeks ago. And so you can see in a very short amount of time how we identified how the best way to continue implementation and move quickly to get both the staff on board and get them organized around the effort. And so there's a lot of activity going on. We're continuing to solicit feedback. I'm doing my best to juggle being out to meet with tribes and stakeholders and share what is happening and get feedback on where we're at and future priorities and things that you would like to see out of BIE. Recent meetings I've had include the Southern Pueblos Council. That was, I think, within a few days of being on the job. I've also had visits with TBIC and MAST, and I'm scheduled to be at NCAI in later in June, and NIEA also have plans to attend there, as well as individual tribal meetings. I've had a number so far, and I'm actually planning a couple of weeks in June to be out on the road and begin to meet with some other tribes. And so some of you may be on the phone, and we haven't reached out and sort of seen if dates will work with all of you, but 4 or 5 tribes within the next couple of weeks adding to that list. So we're definitely committed to continuing that kind of engagement and that feedback, and look forward to continuing to do that. With that said, my time is limited. The Secretary always says we turn into pumpkins on January 19th. And so I want to make sure that I'm also balancing that engagement with being here and getting the work done that you all want us to be getting done. Thankfully, as we build out the team, there will be more hands to help making sure we're doing that. And I will get to the next slide, which is staffing. But before I do that, I also wanted to talk about another milestone that we've reached in the reorganization, and that's a critical one that I've alluded to thus far, but really haven't talked about in depth, is the standing up the school operations side. We did get a bit of money in 2016 to help begin to realign the school operations division, and we prioritized hiring our school safety specialists as a result of the GAO report that many of you are aware of, where some inspections just completely, were not done, or may have been done inadequately. And so we are prioritizing getting those staff on board. Those recruitments are out right now, if not closed. I'm not entirely sure, but we're in the process of advertising and bringing those staff on to address that critical problem. And that's sort of the very beginnings of what we're doing in school operations. And so that leads me to sort of the staffing piece. So what is happening now? We have 57 of 123 advertised positions in the ADD and ERCs. Those positions have been filled. So you can see that we're still looking for new talent to bring to the organization. There are a number of jobs that have been opened, and they can be found on the usajobs.gov website. We are really hoping through our partnership with NCAI, NIEA, AHEC, and others, we can encourage all of the talented people we know that we have out there in Indian country who are familiar with us and those who are looking to join us to pursue opportunities in working with the organization. There's a really great opportunity here to be part of something that is a big change, a significant change for our communities, and we have moved over the majority, well over the majority. I think we're in the very final stages of moving over our current BIE staff into what is the new reorganized BIE, and that's where we have now positions that are available to the public to begin to apply for. And so that's happening in stages, and I encourage you all to look and encourage others, really help us be a megaphone for this opportunity to work for the organization and join public service and join BIE in a way that's going to contribute. We also have a few positions within the central office that we need to hire for, and we're in the process of scheduling interviews for that. And that includes positions like that Sovereignty and Education, Indian Education office that I mentioned earlier. There are also a number of positions that we have advertised and haven't gotten applications for, including our native language and culture specialists. So those are critical positions, but we're having a hard time getting folks to apply for those positions. So again, anything you all can do to help us would be great. Positions that we haven't been able to fill are going to be announced in the next several weeks. So again, we would point you back to that website. And we will try to highlight through social media and other ways positions as they can become available as well, because I know that usajobs.gov website can be a little clunky. And so we'll do our best at BIE to begin to make sure you're aware of what those opportunities for employment are, and ask you to share and retweet and whatever the social media of choice requires those opportunities. So on to the next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I've alluded to this a little bit, and I think Tony did as well, what we're trying to do here through all of this and bringing these the current employees that we already have as we move them over into the new structure, and the new employees that we're bringing into the structure. It creates an opportunity for us to make sure that we are reinforcing that this is a new culture and environment at BIE. We want to make sure that we're inspiring the next generation, that we are bringing in individuals and creating an environment for employees who want to really be a part of something bigger than themselves and are contributing in a positive way, not only in the educational environment, but just in the environment as a whole that exists in our schools for our students. So they can be learning from them, be surrounded by them. And the best way for us to do that as an organization is to make sure that we're continuing to message. That's what we're about. That we have a focus on teaching and learning and making sure the outcomes for our students are improved, and we're closing that achievement gap that we've identified. We want to make sure that we're creating an organization that communicates across divisions. All too often in all of government, and even within bureaus, including BIE, we operate in silos, and those silos often put all kinds of pressure on our constituency, and here it would be our schools, our principals, our superintendents, our teachers. And rather than demanding multiple reports and information multiple times, we, the BIE, should be a coordinated organization that communicates across divisions, so that we're asking for information from our schools and then sharing it within, and not asking it from schools multiple times. And that is a bit of a shift. We've operated in silos in the past, and our new organization isn't meant to operate that way. But that's where the people and the personalities behind those charts and in those positions and with those titles really need to be given the freedom to operate in such a way that they're looking for solutions, and as solutions come forward from schools, that we're able to operate and navigate the bureaucracy that we operate in. That's our reality. We are. but we need to be breaking that down as much as possible, working within the side rails of what the law and our regulations require. But when good solutions are presented and we can find a way to navigate them, we want to make sure we're responsive to that. And in doing so, I think we empower and we create a good working environment for our staff, and that will translate into, I think, a very positive school environment for our kids. We have operated very much as a command and control, a lot of pressure put downward on schools, and we want to flip that model into a much more kind of customer service model. So schools are at the top, and the ERCs are the support centers. ADDs and the DC office are supporting those. They're the foundation for the schools, not reporting lines that push down on schools. And again, that's a bit of a flip and a change in our environment, and it won't happen overnight. It's a long-term effort, but everyone around this table I know is completely committed and bought into that approach. And we're messaging that to our current staff, and definitely looking for new employees who bring that approach with them as well. We want to make sure we're identifying best practices to drive change in school and student performance, and that those people are allowed to flourish. So this is a little bit of, I've already sort of touched on this, the hiring that we've done. This slide is really sort of meant to talk about the most immediate things that we're working on. So after we hang up on this call, what are we going to be turning towards? We're going to continue the hiring at the ADD's offices, the ERCs, and central office. We still have a ways to go. We've got a good chunk of those positions placed, but we have more to do there. We'll continue that work. As we bring on this new staff, we have to make sure that we have staff induction and orientation opportunities available. We're pursuing bringing as many of the BIE employees together as we can this summer to help message this new culture and environment and help introduce people to each other and create the support system for schools that is our goal. We want to make sure that we have the tribal accountability system, so the alternative accountability workbooks that I mentioned earlier, that we continue that work and continue to make sure that the tribes who are interested in pursuing that have what they need, have the capacity, that we're helping them build the capacity and answer questions both from us and Department of Education that need to be answered in order to continue the success of Miccosukee. We'll continue our technical assistance to support tribes. I've already mentioned the language, history, and culture specialists that we need help in identifying. We also have Native Language Policy Memorandum that we'll want to continue to implement, as well as the tribal education codes that we talked about in our TED grants. And then finally, something I know that is of interest and that we're committed to doing is the FERPA data agreements. We do have 2 tribes that have completed those. I think that there is a high level of interest here in making sure that we have expanded opportunities for tribes who want to enter into these agreements. And we have a model agreement that if we haven't shared already, we'll very soon on our website to help guide that work and continue that work product. So, and then obviously the phase 2 of school operations, which we're going to talk a little bit more in depth now, is another critical piece of work that we'll have to invest time in over the next several months, and to make sure that we have that school operations side built up. I've already referenced the fact that pieces of what it takes to operate BIE exist across the organization, not within BIE, and the phase 2 really gets to solving some of those problems. With that, I'll turn to my colleagues Vicki and Marilee and have them sort of walk through the next couple of slides and get into the school operations side before we close out the presentation.
Thank you, Anne Marie. This is Vicki of Vicki and Marilee. So I'm going to ask, we're really going to have a 2-prong approach here. My name is Vicki Forrest, and I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. I'm not an educator. I'm a CPA, so my background is in Chief Financial Officer for my tribe, for the Assistant Secretary, and now for BIE. So it's a thrill for me to be here. And then I'm going to ask Marilee to talk about where we're going in school ops as I talk about where we started and then what we're doing today. So as Anne-Marie stated, Section 4 of the order established the School Operation Division. And as you can see there, school operations in this context means human resources, communications, education, technology, budget and finance, facilities, grants, and acquisitions. So the stated goal is there to establish organizational capacity. We're really doing what Tony, Anne-Marie, and Rosie already talked about. It's my job to change the way that we do business to support schools instead of the other way around. So where school operations fit in the reform pillars are in the agile organizational environment. One of the things that we, or the study group heard in the many listening sessions and consultations to get to the blueprint were 3 large issues, which are contracting, human resources, and communication. So in what we're currently doing, we work with our friends at BIA and the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Management, and that's resulted in a very large increase in processing times for special education service delivery contracts. Special education is a particular concern to me because I have a son that has special needs, and I'm proud to be able to say that we've closed the processing time it took to get those kinds of contracts in place for the neediest of our students. The second place there are certainly a lot of issues about, as Anne-Marie talked about earlier, with human resources. So there we're streamlining and cutting the time for Tony and Tamara to get staff into their schools. That's a huge effort we're doing now. And then in communication, we hired a communication director, Kim Biju. We were able to get Kim on and start our webinar series. I know some we've done with NIEA in the past, now this one with NCAI. We also have a series of instructional webinars that we've done for almost each part of the business lines and school operations. We'll continue to do that as we go forward. The communications plan talks about a BIE newsletter. Kim issues that every 2 weeks, and that really is subscribed to by a couple of thousand folks, so it's been a really great tool to improve communication. So as a result of the blueprint and the recommendations there, we detailed from the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Management, the HR staff that was working on BIE operations to directly report to Anne-Marie and myself. So that's helped us with realigning the processes and working through the recommendations of the new teacher project that Anne-Marie talked about earlier to streamline that operation. And I talked about hiring Kim in 2015, and Kim continues to try to revamp our website. We're putting a lot of effort into that. It's not where it should be, but we do have a lot of information there, and we continue to work through that effort. So in 2016, Anne-Marie talked about the $2.68 million that was appropriated for school ops, and what we're doing with that, as Anne-Marie stated, was our highest focus because of GAO and other issues are school safety specialists. So we did advertise for 7 of those, and we're working on making the appropriate selections, ensuring they get trained appropriately, and that these guys are really going to help us address those concerns and make sure our kids are safe in our schools. The other part of staff that we're hiring in school operations is one that really goes back to building a new culture and a new environment in BIE in terms of financial reporting and management. So we're hiring grants management specialists, and those are designed differently than grants management specialists are in the rest of the United States. This staff will be located with Rosie in the ERCs, closer to schools, and working as a part of her ERC groups with tribes. They're going to have a twofold mission, which is certainly meeting the obligations of the United States under the law, but my
The part I'm really excited about is these guys will also offer technical assistance to tribes in financial areas should they ask for that. One of the things that I'm going to work with Anne Marie, we're going to reach out to the Native American Finance Officers Association and try to think about how we can work with them to set up training for tribal school staff. That's one of the, I've been here for 4 years, I've got to be out in the field a lot, and I know that that's a real need there. And in Indian country, there are not a lot of trained financial personnel. So I'm hoping to this effort that we really can, I think the term is grow our own, where kids are at, introduce them to financial operations, and then hopefully get this training together. So that's where we started and what we've done. I'm going to ask Marilee to introduce herself, and really has been my partner, and talk about where we're going.
Great, thank you, Vicki. Thank you, and welcome everyone to this important conversation about restructuring for student achievement. The school operations area has been my sole, not my sole, but kind of my specialized focus since I've been with the Bureau for now about 2 years. I was the former director of the Department of Defense Education Activities of Schools. And prior to that, in many different roles and capacities, I served on the school operations side of the school system. And starting out as a teacher recruiter, and then eventually leading all of the school operations functions for their worldwide operation. I saw this, this structure in my day with the Department of Defense when the military services owned bits and pieces of school operations, and we knock on their doors very pleasantly trying to get support for technology or schools built or jobs filled, only to understand that high priority items and activities interfered with a dedicated focus on schools, to eventually leading a reform effort for them that consolidated all of the school operations functions under the director of the school system. And so when I was asked to join this team, I brought that experience with me, and you will see in the restructuring of school operations that the most important thing I think that we have done when this thing is completed is that we will move all the day-to-day operations on the for support teaching and learning under the director of the Bureau of Indian Education. And while we will remain wonderful partners with our folks in the Bureau of Indian Affairs and DASM, and certainly rely upon them for support, we will have our own team that is dedicated to BIE. And so when we wake up one day, when this thing is completed, we will be able, the director will be able to set the priorities for human resources against a set of priorities that he or she may have for the school system. So if the focus is on early childhood education, we are going to scour the nation to find great early childhood educators for our principals, and it won't be done at the expense of any other of our program areas. When our educators tell us that they want to improve STEM opportunities in our schools for elementary children, and they want to add science labs in elementary schools, our facilities team will be their partner in helping design schools and classrooms that reflect the additional curricular emphasis and installing labs. So the discussion and the conversation for school operations becomes a true support to the educational program requirements, and not one where the where the school operations are driving what happens in schools, and schools have to live with what we give them, but rather they push the demand signal. For us, school operations is not completely off the ground. Vicki talked to you about what we did in fiscal year 15 to accelerate some small pieces, but we are waiting for the Congress to give to us its green light so that we can proceed. So I think just for the next few minutes, I want to tell you that when that green light is received in our different divisions, what you might expect from these different offices. You will see that the school operations division, like the education side of the house, is moving closer to the field to support the schools and where the action is. And we've established within the offices of the ADDs in Tony and in Rosie's offices a school operations team. And there they will represent the functional areas that you see listed: human resources, educational technology, budget and finance, etc., so that when they walk outside their door, they have resources and experts available to them to solve the problems that emanate in their schools. Another very important position that we're going to give them is a point of contact for all school operations. And when their school principals have an issue, they will no longer have to spend their day trying to find someone within the bureaucracy to help them. All those hours that they spend, and they have regaled us in many stories about those hours, they will now be rededicated to their instructional leadership responsibilities. But they now can call that single point of contact in the ADD office. That's not to say that they're not going to have a great relationship with the facilities person in there, and they may deal directly with the facilities person, and that's fine. But on the days when they just want to give someone a task list and say, these are the things I need to have done, there will be someone there who will carry that responsibility for them and free them of the burdens that these operational functions carry. Again, the entire focus here is on student achievement and supporting student achievement through school operations. There will be a small footprint here in Washington. These are folks who will act more like advisors in each of the functional areas. And then the main folks who do the work where they roll up their sleeves and actually do contracts and actually draw plans for schools will be located in Albuquerque at a regional office. We've tried to centralize and consolidate to the extent that we can so that we can leverage the talent that we have, and we reduce the expenses of operating in some expensive parts of the country like Washington, D.C. We were also very mindful that all of this restructuring will not come at the expense of schools. And in fact, the restructuring gives our schools 30 additional resources for now. It is probably an insatiable appetite at the moment, but our schools, believe it or not, they're like mini organizations. And as we introduce digital learning and technology as a way of instructing our children, we need folks who can help our teachers with the equipment. And so when the printer doesn't work and they can't get the PowerPoint presentation up, or the probes won't work in the science lab, rather than what they do today, they knock on the door of a colleague and say, anybody know anything about this? We are now going to give them resources at the school level that are dedicated to helping them solve those problems that get in the way of their instructional programs. 30 is a very understated need. It will grow. We did it based upon a shared servicing model, but as we become more technology ready, these resources we hope will increase. So even in our restructuring, we were mindful that the schools had to be served through school operations, and again in a way that they could use those resources. We did not want to unnecessarily bulk up. There are functions that are performed today that will not be performed when schools move to a grant status. Rosie does not deal with our acquisition function at all. I won't say that's a wonderful thing, Rosie, but you know, but our bureau operating schools do. But when they move to a grant status, they won't have that responsibility. So we didn't want to bulk up here, again, making us a very top-heavy organization. And we also wanted to be able to leverage what exists today in our partners, who will now be our partners in performing our work. So data systems that existed in personnel or facilities, we'll still use them. We're not going to create our own. There's no point in doing that. There's no value add to that work. So we're excited about what school operations can become. We're excited about becoming a true partner for our mission of improving student achievement, and for joining really a commitment to raising the participation level of all of our children in our society, and ensuring that they are wonderful citizens of their tribe and wonderful citizens of this nation. And it takes both the academic and the school operations side to do it, and we look forward to our work. We will begin hopefully in FY16 with this existing resources and the augmentation from the budget, and then we've gone to Congress and we said, look, we just can't do this within what we have today, and if we do, we're going to be taking it at the expense of others. We don't want to do that. So come on, help us out here. You're committed, so are we. We need a few extra spaces here, and we're asking your help. And so we put that in our budget for FY17, and we're hoping that they hear that call from us so that we can complete the restructuring in FY17.
Thank you, Marilyn. I think a critical piece of that is that we need to make sure that we are meeting the charge that's set before us in phase 1, and that will instill confidence in Congress as well as our stakeholders and our communities and our schools that we can do exactly as promised, everything you and Vicki outlined for what phase 2 and school operations will look like. Being successful with the work we're doing now, I think, will be a huge catalyst to getting that support for phase 2. So I'll make some final comments before we open it up for questions. I wanted to just kind of reinforce the importance of the school operations piece because we are looking at this phase 2 implementation, and assuming and hoping we get this budget increase to build it out the way we really want to and the way we know it needs to be done. It's really important. I think one of the ways I've described it is if you bring human resources and these other functions under BIE, it's not that they weren't being done, but they were being done at the pace and cadence of a regional BIA office, not at the pace and the cadence of a school year. And that's what we really need to do to be responsive to our schools. And so that's why just one small description of how I think this is so critical. So, you know, I'll close with this. I think that there will be a day when the blueprint for reform, reorganization, those words are just no longer a part of our vernacular, where all of this work we're doing right now is a piece of our history, and that history will be the moment in time when we really did finally commit to comprehensive change for our schools that impacted our students in a way that we are closing that achievement gap, we are contributing to student well-being, and we are promoting tribal self-determination. I think the 5 pillars get us to that. I don't think I know the 5 pillars get us to that. And the activity that we're doing under each of those, I think, get us closer every day. Reorg and reform are being replaced with words. I hear them in the office by this team that sits around me pretty regularly these days. Words like success and something great and exciting and, you know, just really positive words and positive energy. And I hope that that infiltrates the entire rest of the organization. And I hope that you as our partners get a sense of what we're hunkered down doing here right now. As I indicated earlier, it is kind of the people around this table, as well as our staff in the field, who are helping to execute this. And we are anxious to get these new bodies into the organization so that the people who are currently part of it can really focus on their roles and not wear 10 different hats. And the new employees can both give us the energy, and we can share our energy with them, and we can start focusing on all the new activities that are part of what's coming ahead in the rest of 16 and beyond. So we have lots of success stories out there. I visited a number of schools, and I can't tell you how amazing, you all know this, our youth are. We know the data out of that Native Youth Report. We know the achievement gap, but let's remind ourselves of all the successes as well. And I think we as BIE need to do a better job of sharing the phenomenal things that are happening in our schools with the students and the teachers and the administrators that we have out there. And we're going to focus on that at the same time we're doing all of this work here, because it's always good to remind ourselves of that. So I've gone on beyond what I wanted to, but I'm hoping that it was all for positive, and we'll ask that the coordinators of the logistics of the call go ahead and open us up for questions, or have our partners who may want to make final comments before we do that to please do so.
Okay. So this is Denise. I wanted to just remind the participants that if you have a question, just use the raise hand function on the webinar screen and we will acknowledge your question. And while folks are doing that, we did get a couple questions during the webinar, Anne-Marie, that maybe you and your team can answer. I had the one question, well, one of the main questions that we've received is, will a copy of the PowerPoint be available afterwards? And I will tell folks that the webinar and the recording and the PowerPoint will be made available on NCI's web page after this, and we'll send out the link to all the participants on the call. And it looks like we have a question from, oh, the little hand went down again. I think somebody raised their hand and took it back down electronically. But we have another question here. And the question is, who should we contact if our school district is interested in pursuing an alternative accountability workbook, and are there any resources available online?
So the contact for that would be the Associate Deputy Director for our Division of Performance and Accountability, Jeff Hamley. And yeah, so we have the directory online that should have his contact information, and he would be the primary contact for beginning that work and initiating that conversation.
Great. And then we also have a question about the Johnson O'Malley programs and how that fits into the reorganization.
Okay, this is Vicki Forrest. And so as when we did consultation about the realignment, one of the consultations was solely focused in Oklahoma on the Johnson O'Malley program. And so currently we have a national Johnson O'Malley coordinator that is actually taking another job within our realignment, so she's taking on some new responsibilities in the field, but we'll be advertising that soon. So the office in Oklahoma, upon consultation with tribes there, the focus of that office is working with public schools on JOM. And so that office is going to be renamed the JOM Center, and they'll continue to provide that technical assistance to public schools. Also I'll be working with Rosie Davis for ADD tribally controlled should schools need school technical assistance, but as a result of the consultation, it sounded like it was that office is solely focused on JLM contracts and working with public schools and tribes about how those work. So that's kind of the current status and what we of JLM, and then what we look for in our reorganization.
Great. And we have a question from Deborah Bordeaux, who's on the webinar. Deborah, if you don't mind unmuting your phone and asking your question now.
Hello? Can you hear me? I just wanted to know, what is Anne-Marie's contact information?
I can give you my email address.
That'll work. Thank you.
You ready? Yep. It's Ann, A-N-N, dot Bledsoe, which is a capital R, which is B-L-E-D-S-O-E, Downs, D-O-W-N-E-S. So Bledsoe Downs is one word, at BIA.gov.
Great. And now we have a question from Kathy Bowker. Kathy, we've unmuted your line. Please go ahead.
Yes, this is Shiny Butte School. We were asking, what is the status of the Great Plains region?
We are in a hold. Well, for the Dakotas, the ERCs are not being established per an instruction from Congress. But the line officers will remain, the line offices remain in place there pending the final outcome of the litigation.
So How long is that going to take? Because like Cheyenne Butte does, we don't have a line office. We have nobody in the position.
So it's my understanding that you're working with an office, or with, I'm sorry, what's the, Eric North, my apologies, is the primary point of contact there.
Anything else?
Okay, and we have a question from Bonnie Hayes. Bonnie, we're unmuting your line. Please go ahead.
Yes, I think the last organization chart I saw was back in February. And with the response to the question that Dr. Bowker just asked, is there going to be a new reorganization chart out that will represent the fact that the ERCs and the Dakotas are not going to be filled? And then also on the new organization chart, will there be titles or people that have already filled positions? For example, I'm wondering if someone has been assigned or placed in the Office of Sovereignty and Indian Education.
So that position has not been filled as of right now. To your question about a new organizational chart, we're hopeful that there's a positive resolution to the litigation. So I understand that the organizational chart does have the ERCs that are in the Dakotas, because it's our hope that we are able to implement either through conversations with the tribes who are parties to that litigation, finding a resolution or a positive outcome within the court itself. And so we're hopeful that that is the chart that we can operate under, but recognize that those of you who need services at the school level need to understand how you're going to navigate that. So I can talk with our staff here about the best way to make sure where the ERCs are on hold, that people know what their lines of communication are and where their resources are available to them. I think that's a good point, in that despite the fact that we can't implement there, things need to operate, and you all need to know how to navigate BIE separate and apart from where we want to be, but where we actually are.
And then a follow-up to that is, on that organization chart that was available in February, we did not see, that I remember, the 6 safety and occupational health specialist positions and how they're going to fit into that whole organization chart.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The organizational chart that came out in February reflected the existing positions and how the school operations functions that currently exist in BIE would be organized. We are actually, as we speak, developing an organizational chart which combines what you saw with the new positions, both those that we are asking for in FY17 and those that we are adding because of the FY16 increase. We expect to have that published when the Congress gives us the green light. So we're hopeful in the next few weeks that we are able to share that with you. Before I came to this meeting, I was actually working on that chart, but so you will have one. We recognize the need for that.
Okay, and we have an online question about ESSA, and what are you doing to support schools in the transition to ESSA since AYP is no longer in the law?
So I know that Ed has had a couple of consultations on ESSA, and there's another one happening, I want to say the end of this month. And that's one way to get feedback and input to Ed. And I'll ask my team if there are other ways in which we are supporting as that law has come into effect.
We are in the process of developing the teacher equity plan, as Tony and Rosie discussed earlier. That is an element of the revised state plan. We're also working on the negotiated rulemaking, which will help inform the ESSA. May 31st, they did close down the deadline for submissions for people for the committee, and I know since Bonnie's on the call, we did receive the recommendations from your tribe, which I believe was Roger Bordeaux. So I think in terms of the rollout, this year is viewed as a transition year. We're not actually supposed to have a state plan finalized until school year 17-18. So in the meantime, BIE is part of the conversation. We're also actively engaged with the CCSSO and partaking in many of the discussions and webinars that they host so that we're able to build out an evidence-based state plan. And that negotiated rulemaking is a big part of that process. So we encourage your participation and engagement with those meetings.
And that was a bit of a failure on my part when I mentioned CCSO as a partner earlier. I didn't build out my comments, but they have been, we've started in the past, 2 or 3 weeks. The Chief School Transformation Officer that I mentioned earlier, his name is Brad. Brad has been working with them pretty closely to talk about things that are happening in their organization and provide technical assistance to us as we look at those ways to support tribes through and under ESSA. So I think that's going to be a critical partnership for us there as well.
Thank you. And then we have an online question about the positions, the job opportunities that you spoke about earlier, Anne-Marie, and how can, if folks aren't on USA Jobs, is there a way for you to kind of point us to a place where we could find those jobs, or could you route those around to the organizations, or how could we better help you get the word out about those job opportunities?
So our website, we will try and make sure that those are displayed very prominently, the opportunities. The applications themselves, I will say, however, do need to be submitted through usajobs.gov. That is sort of the federal government way of getting applications in for positions. But it doesn't prevent us from getting the information out on what those positions are in a much easier way. And so we will use both our website and our social media to highlight them. So on that last slide, which may still be up, our Facebook page, Twitter, are great ways to try and find out or find where some of those positions are, as well as our website.
Great. And then we have a question from Benita Morin. Benita, please go ahead.
I have a question relative to ESSA. Because of this reorganization, you know, you had tribes that had really low AYP. So what is the process as far as assisting those tribes? Is there priorities, or does that not matter now because AYP is not part of the ESSA anymore?
As we move forward and we're transitioning, as Wendy mentioned, you know, we won't have an actual plan in place for a year from now, but we're still looking at our traditional types of methods that you've employed. We have NWEA, we have your accreditation report, we do have the information that you submit into Native Star. So all of those elements will not go away. We'll work with you on what you have as far as your comprehensive school assessment needs.
Okay, and then we have an online question regarding facilities management and whether there's a short or long-term plan to move facilities management and design for new and renovated facilities out of Indian Affairs and into Indian Education.
Yes, we're planning to move facilities into the Bureau of Indian Education by the end of fiscal year 17. That's one of the functions that will require some additional resources from the Congress. We're going to begin, however, to stand up the effort in FY16 this year, but we'll have just a few number of positions. Until that time, we'll work with the Bureau of Indian Affairs to develop our 5-year plan, which will identify the schools that need to be renovated, rebuilt, and for repairs and maintenance to be conducted on schools. The 5-year plan we hope to have rolled out and completed by the beginning part, I guess by sometime this summer actually. I'm leaving here and going. I'll have a better time estimate for you. But we're not waiting really for the restructuring to begin the very important task of identifying our schools that are in the worst condition and moving out on a plan that asks Congress's help to fund these chronic underfunded needs for our BIE schools. There are so many schools, maybe 73 schools that are in poor condition, and those schools must be addressed, and they cannot be addressed within BIE's resources. So while the restructuring is going on, there is a full court press effort to get this 5-year plan done and the needs recognized to Congress so they can help us fund these schools and ensure that they are in excellent condition and support teaching and learning.
Yeah, I think the 5-year plan is really an effort to collect the data we need to bring our schools who are on that poor condition list to bring them up to good condition. But we also realize that we need to make sure that our schools, whether they're individual buildings or campuses that are in good condition, how do we make sure we're funding appropriately to keep them in that condition? And as we all know, the school replacement list that was announced and the funding that was just announced for 3 schools, that was completing the 2004 list. We don't want that to be the pattern of how we build out new facilities for BIE in the future. And the best thing we can do is get the data together through this 5-year plan to show how we're going to bring our schools up to good condition, keep them in good condition, and make sure we're operating the new ones that we're building in a way that they're getting the full lifespan that they're expected to. That's what the 5-year plan is really meant to do, and we're driving towards getting that completed so we can get that data to OMB and Congress and everyone so that we can figure out how we're going to tackle this problem.
Okay, and then I think we have time for one more question, and this question is about the research component. It says in the past there's talk of BIE developing a research component, including establishing a research agenda to help identify best practices in native teaching and learning and native language resiliency. Is the BIE still moving forward with the research component, or is that on hold for now?
So we are moving forward with that. It is still a priority. We don't have a staff in that position yet, but it is still an objective of and office in our under reorg.
Okay, and then 2 really quick ones. One was, can you repeat the name of the Chief Schools Transformation Officer, and has the Division Chief Office of Sovereignty and Education position been filled?
The name of that individual is Brad, B-R-A-D, Jupp, and he comes to us from the Department of Education. He moved over here on a political appointment, and no, we do not have that person selected for that office yet.
And I think we have one more. What are you using to identify the most critical schools in need? Good condition does not necessarily mean they are in good condition.
Can you repeat that again?
What criterion are you using to determine what's the school condition of schools?
Yep, I think, yeah. So we have an inventory. The facilities office has an inventory. I'm speaking a little bit outside of my lane here, but There is data in our what we call SBMS system, and that is, so the reports that were done, and then that is not complete data. There is a contractor who has gone out to schools and gathered information, so we supplemented that inventory with that data. There's 3 or 4 data points that the facilities office used that helped create that criteria. So I'm losing my words here, but that helped create the information that where the analysis was done from. So the contractor looked at numerous data points in order to establish whether or not a school was in that condition.
Yes, this is Marilee. There's a ratio to amplify a bit of what Anne-Marie said. There's a ratio that we use to come up with a facility condition index, which identifies the overall condition of the school, its parts and pieces, the roof, the mechanics, etc. And it's a ratio that's built on what those repair needs are against the full replacement value of that school. A condition index is one factor that is used to determine that a school is in poor condition. You could have a school that's in poor condition, but it still has to be renovated. And that might be because it's overcrowded. So one of the other conditions is overcrowding. Another might be that it doesn't have room for an educational program that's necessary. For example, it's short on classrooms for language and culture. It doesn't have a cafeteria when there's no other place for children to eat. And there are, these criteria were developed several years ago, back in 2002 maybe, 2005, thank you Jackie, by a group of individuals within the BIE who looked at factors that influence quality education and school facilities operations. The criteria, and that criteria has been used over the last decade or more to analyze and rank order, if you will, the condition or the schools and in some sort of order, priority order from worst condition to the best condition. These criteria were used as an example to come up with the 2004 priority list, of which we've just finished with the help of Congress, the schools on all of that list. And the same criteria were used to construct the 10 that we have today that are waiting to be funded.
Thank you. And Anne-Marie, maybe is there someone that participants could email if they have any follow-up questions? I know that we had a few that we probably won't get to because the webinar's time is wrapping up now, but if you could designate someone for folks to reach out to, that would be great.
Yeah, so I think Juanita would be great point of contact to help field questions. I'm going to have her give you her address. Denise, it's juanendoza@bie.edu.
Great, thank you. And I just want to thank you all, the whole BIE team, for coming on today and spending so much time with us. I know that you guys are living this every day, but it's so helpful for us to regroup on our side and get this information out to our stakeholders, so we appreciate the time today. And Anawake, thank you so much for joining us from NIEA. I know that you guys are very involved in this on a daily basis as well. So I just want to thank everyone, and we will post this on NCI's website for you to go back and review anything. And just thank you and have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.